Yes.
Thank you. But no, Will is fine.
Okay,
And
awesome.
we are live. All right. Perfect. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Sister Soul Sessions, where we are elevating entrepreneurs one soulful conversation at a time. I'm your host, Brittany.
And I'm Brandy, and tonight we're diving into something we know our audience loves, and that's real talk about business, credit, as well as generational wealth. And we've got the perfect guest to help us unpack all of it.
That's right. He's an entrepreneur, investor, financial literacy expert, author, and speaker who's helped thousands of people transform their financial futures. From business credit to legacy building, his mission is clear: to teach people how to win in wealth and in wisdom.
So please, Soul Squad, let's welcome our guest, Mr. Will Roundtree, to the Sister Soul Sisters family. Thank you so much. And Will, would you like to go ahead and take a moment and introduce yourself to our guest?
Man, you ladies did such a great job. I was wondering who you was talking about. But no, Will Roundtree, I've been, originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I live in Las Vegas, been here 20 years now. October 5th, 2025 made my 20th year in Las Vegas. And, I tell people I've been on this entrepreneurship journey since 2003. And, and I tell people, which I actually still have, this is actually my journal from 2004. Like that's how long I've, taken this journey seriously. And, I often tell people I failed the first 12 years, but that failure was the data that I needed to be on the path that I'm on. Because I think often as entrepreneurs, we stay in things too long that don't serve us no purpose. And so sometimes failing fast is what we need to do. But because we have this, so many people are so gripped by fear, we're scared to even get started. So I tell people, I was willing to bet on myself in 2005, moved to Las Vegas. Literally, I had $500 to my name. And, and I was sleeping in my car, couch surfing, taking showers at the local gym. And I remember I had a mentor before I moved to Las Vegas who told me eventually credit will become the new dollar. And I didn't know what he meant by that at the time. Fast forward to 2025. I mean, you can't do anything with bad credit. And if you do, or if you are fortunate enough, bad credit is expensive. You're trying to buy a car, you got 20-30% down and your interest rate is 22%. You're trying to rent an apartment, it's 2 to 3 times the deposit. You can't get a job in finance. You can't, I had a cousin who graduated law school, and he told me that even if you pass the bar, if your credit is ruined, you can't be a practicing attorney. So credit, it's the barometer for so many things. But I think that there's over the years kind of been this black cloud of what credit is or how it should be used in different things. And so I'm just always fortunate of my journey. I'm excited about where my life is going, just because I've been able to help so many people, and now I'm seeing the residual effects of just the amount of people who I've helped and how their lives have changed, and even now just instilling those lessons into my 15-year-old son. And so I'm excited.
Oh, that was a great intro, and definitely thank you so much for letting us know more about your journey. We just want to dig a little bit deeper, and we watch a lot of your content, and we know you've helped so many entrepreneurs along the way, especially beyond the hustle and into like real businesses and building. So we just wanted to know what were some of the core systems and structures that you believe every entrepreneur needs in place before they can start to grow their businesses.
Oh wow. The first one I would always say is the mindset. But I think that word gets utilized kind of too loosely, because when we think about mindset, we only think of it from the standpoint of like being motivated, being inspired. Like your mindset is something that you have to be prepared to hear no every day for the first half of your journey. You have to be prepared that the first several investments you invest in may not work out. You have to be prepared for none of your family members to want to even understand what it is that you're doing. You have to be prepared that the person who you may be dating or married to may think you're crazy for doing something that they don't see the vision in. Like you have to understand that this is going to be a very lonely journey in the beginning because you haven't proved the concept to the people around you who possibly have been depending on you. There's going to be some sacrifice. And so anytime I'm working with somebody, the first thing I try to do is get them in the mindset of what an entrepreneur is. And when we look at the definition of an entrepreneur, the textbook definition, not Will Roundtree's definition, it is someone who's willing to take on greater than normal risk. And that risk could be financially, that risk could be could be with your time, that risk could be with your loved ones, sacrificing birthdays, Christmases, Valentine. Like it's so much risk involved, but I think that it's almost hard to fathom the undertaking it's gonna take to hit the levels that one say they want to make until they're actually in the trenches of what entrepreneurship is. And so that's the first half of what I try to get them to understand. The second half of that is I have to get them to understand that everything that they've learned up until that point about money was probably either wrong or a lie. Because the biggest misconception is that a lot of people think they know what money is, and they don't, because it's a difference between understanding about making a lot of money and then understanding the economics of money. And one of the misconceptions about understanding the economics of money is that people haven't educated themselves on the cost of money. And I say that because often, I know a lot of people are, let's say wanting to leverage credit, or they're scared to leverage credit, and they'll go and say, hey, I just want an investor to invest in my business. Not knowing that if your business isn't making money, as a brand new investor coming in, I'm going to ask for the lion's share of the business because I'm assuming all of the risk. So some would be willing to take an investor on at a 51% stake in the business for peanuts that they're asking, versus going to leverage credit where you still can retain full ownership. Or once you do, or if you do decide to take the route of leveraging credit, then you have to understand the cost of the money. Do you understand the debt servicing? And so from that standpoint, after we've, reconditioned the thought process of business and entrepreneurship, now I have to get you to understand the language of finance, the language of business, the language of economics, the language of all of these things. Because keep in mind, for a lot of us, we are first generation entrepreneurs. We're the first generation to be successful, the first generation to make 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, or whatever that climax of that goal that you've hit. And but the people in your ear are people who've never been on this path before. And you have to, like I say, you have to unlearn all of that. And so I think the biggest thing is, one, changing the mindset, the shift of it, and then two, helping them to understand the cost of the money, and then really drilling down to what their goal is. I speak to entrepreneurs and business men and women every day, and if I were to talk to 10 of them, 8 of them really don't know what they want to do. They just say, oh, I want to make some money, or I want to retire, or I want some time freedom, or whatever the case may be. And all of those goals are good, but that's not a goal that is going to keep you motivated enough, because as soon as you make that first 10,000, now you're in celebratory mode. As soon as you hit that first 6 figures, now you're in celebratory mode, and then you get stuck there. So it's like a level of focus that you almost kind of you have to be a little bit delusional, to be successful, or to get to the level of success that one wants to get to. So that's probably what I would tell someone who is looking to take this path.
You definitely do have to be delusional every day. Like you were saying, there's so many people who don't understand what you're trying to do when you start your business, sometimes not even yourself. So I feel like that definitely, is a big piece of it. With the climate today, I saw you speaking recently about, how our government shut down, people waiting on relief benefits, things like that. You always speak with, calmness and clarity about that. I guess that comes from experience. But before we dive into anything that technical, what's been on your spirit lately when it comes to business and wealth with what we have going on, and encouraging people to continue to be entrepreneurs during these times?
Man, I would say that the biggest thing that's been on my mind, like right now, we're like post pandemic, and I'm seeing so many entrepreneurs who are winning that are really losing right now. And it's because we've only been conditioned to play the game one way, and that's just to make money. We haven't been we haven't been training to learn how to build some level of stability. And the only way you can do that is you have to own assets. And I think back early into my career, even though I was making money, I was like a hamster on a wheel because I couldn't stop. If I wasn't tap dancing in front of a crowd or doing all of the things where I was making money, I wasn't going to be making any money. But it wasn't until I really started to understand again the language of finance, where it talks about the only way you can build wealth is you have to have something that pays you in spite of you. And that's when I really started taking investing in real estate very seriously, because the only way that I was going to be able to buy my time back is I had to be able to make money, I had to be able to have money make me money, or making money when I'm not actively working. And even when I talk to brand new entrepreneurs, the first thing they say when I ask, why did you start a business or why you want to become an entrepreneur? First thing they say is time freedom. And I say, you're about to work 80 hours a week, right? There is no such thing as time freedom as an entrepreneur. I mean, you could own a franchise of McDonald's, you're still going to work unless you're the one just overseeing the business and willing to pay somebody, a very handsome salary to be the CEO of your franchises. And so I think the climate right now, or just what's been on my subconscious about this, is that very few people were preparing, because they felt, or at least I'm going to make an assumption. I don't want to, just assume. Well, I'm just throwing some words out there. I don't want to make an assumption. People think that just because you made money, year one, year two, that it's going to work like that forever. And it reminds me of a story with the NBA player right now, Sebastian Telfair, who made $20 million as an NBA player and just had to move back to the projects.
Yeah, I was just watching that.
People think that just because you're making money, it will continue to keep coming in, but they don't have anything that's going to sustain that money being able to come in. And I remember when I did a training about the game of Monopoly. And when you look at a Monopoly board, the only way you can win is by owning assets. But and I tell people, if you want to see where a person is at and how they think about finances, or finding out like what their level of understanding how finances and money work, play Monopoly with them. Because if their goal is just to run around the board and collect $200, the only other option outside of getting $200 is paying taxes, paying somebody else rent because you land on their square, or go to jail. There's no other options, and that's how real life works. Yeah, you might be making money, but now you have to continue operating at that level, and you are going to experience burnout. And I was even telling my marketing team today, like, this is my 10th year with my business. I get tired sometimes. I don't travel as much anymore. I was doing 30 cities a year sometimes, and like now, no, like I enjoy sitting at home. I enjoy, just going to Hawaii and doing nothing for, like, I enjoy my time. But it's because I was putting those sacrifices in early. I was making those investments early. And so to the earlier part of that question, I think that we haven't been taught how to prepare properly, because we get so focused on the storm. And while everybody is screaming the storm is coming, I'm training for the storm. And the storm that's coming for most of us is eventually we're going to want to retire. Eventually, health is going to force you to retire. Age is going to, like, something is going to put you in a position where you can't operate at that same high level. And if we don't have any assets that's going to pay us, in spite of us having to work 40, 60, 80 hours a week, it's going to be a very long life, with a bunch of shoulda, coulda, wouldas.
For sure. Not many pensions anymore. We're just not set up the same for retirement. So yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
That was definitely a lot to really think on. And when we jump back into, as far as the topic of sustainability, I was just going to ask, how does an entrepreneur build a business that they can scale without them having to work around the clock?
Is that a trick question? I'm honestly, the only way that's possible is you have to be able to delegate,
Mhm.
and so it's interesting. Like, I kind of pulled back on working with people one on one because when I decide to work with someone one on one, I have to interview them first, because if they're telling me their goal is to scale their business so that they can eventually step away, they're going to have to be able to be in position to make investments in order to do that. And unfortunately, so many business owners don't see the value in paying for help because they've been conditioned to do everything themselves, or they may not be in a position financially to be able to pay for the delegation. Like, if once you get in a certain position in your business, like, you shouldn't be answering and responding to every single customer and client. You shouldn't be handling all of your emails. You shouldn't be the salesperson, your marketing person, your tax book person, the bookkeeper. Like, you can't do all of those things. And so I tell a lot of business owners that you have to be able to focus on money, income producing activity during income producing activity hours. Everything else should be delegated. But if a person can't afford to hire an assistant, they can't afford to hire an ops manager, they can't afford to get bookkeeping, it's going to be very hard for them to scale, because they're going to be locked into to non-income producing duties, which does not allow them to be able to get in front of the customers that they need in order to be able to bring in the type of revenue that they're going to need. But that's why sometimes we have to understand, or even when I talk about why having access to credit is important, because if I have a line of credit for 50,000, that at least affords me to be able to cover payroll for a couple people, whether I outsource or have in-state, or whether I hire a family member, or whatever the case may be. And so I often tell people the only way you're going to be able to scale and get out of the role of the day-to-day, or as us CEOs say, when you can operate above your business as opposed to inside your business, you have to be able to pay for delegation, pay for help, hire professionals, and you have to become a professional at hiring professionals. That's the only way.
I love that you were saying, systems kind of build the freedom that we're all looking for, right?
You have to.
So yeah, what are some examples of systems that you put in place that help with the day to day that would maybe assist us on, scaling, funding? Obviously, you say credit is king. How do we get to those places? What systems do we need for that?
I mean, a lot of it's going to be dependent on your industry, but I mean, as far as for me, if you're not utilizing some type of automation in your business, you're light years behind.
Mhm.
Like, you won't even be able to compete. So obviously, my CRM system, and my CRM system is customized to my my workflows of what I need done. So I had to hire a person who was an expert in setting up my systems.
Yeah.
I had to be able to create systems for my automation to handle what's called my nurture sequences, meaning I also have to be able to build a list, or build my customer list offline, and not solely rely on social media. Meaning, if
Mhm.
social media shut down today, you still have to be able to communicate with your customers. And a lot of people are not in that position because they're not housing their the people who are coming in or opting in, or even if a
Right.
person comes to an in-person event and they write their name and email down, where are you housing that information? So you got to have a good CRM system, or some type of system where you can store your clients' information. Once that information is inside the CRM, then you have to have some type of nurture sequence, which essentially is, how are you keeping them engaged? You have to be able to, if you have a brand new product, you got to be able to get it to them within seconds. Or if you want to be able to do some type of product offering, some type of discounts, if you're doing a survey, because I do surveys a lot with my clients, because sometimes as entrepreneurs, we want to offer them what we want to offer. No, I'm going to
Mhm.
offer my clients what it is they say they need. And we do that by leveraging surveys. I also have, my assistant. So I have two different assistants. I have a virtual assistant who runs my calendar, and then I have a day-to-day assistant who may handle my day-to-day stuff, whether it's picking up my dry cleaning, or sometimes I use them just to drive me around the city because I need to maximize every minute in
Yeah.
order to be able to, or sometimes I'll just get Uber. Even when I'm traveling, I never rent a car. I always, get car service because I need to be able to maximize my time, talk to my clients. I have an operations manager. My operations manager runs my entire operation. So if something goes on within the organization, it doesn't come to me because I'm
Right.
not, I need to hire somebody who can solve the problems for the organization. That's the only way I was able to remove myself and operate above the business, because I need to be the vision, I need to be the talent. So I have an operations manager. Then from the executive side, I have my CFO, which is the person who handles the finance, who handles my bookkeeping, who handles my invoicing, who handles all of those things. I have my legal counsel. I have, so I've put together like a board of executives. I have my middle management, and then I have my sales team, because I can't be the one doing all of the sales. So yeah, so it really just depends on where a person is at on their journey, what their budget looks like. Are they, where they're at on their scale? But yeah, you have to delegate. You got to put systems in place, and it's gonna cost you some money. It will cost you some money.
Yeah, it definitely is dependent on where you are with it. So that kind of brings us back to the credit conversation. You teach people to use business credit as leverage and not a liability. Can you kind of break down what that really means and how it can change the way someone grows their business, especially like you said with delegation, things like that?
Yeah, because one of the biggest mistakes I made early in my journey is I was trying to save money to put into my business. And I often tell people the most expensive dollar you can borrow is from your paycheck. And that's
Mm,
because every dollar you make, 30% of it goes to Uncle Sam. And then 64% of it is used for your basic living expenses, your rent, mortgage, car note, insurance, etc. So you really only have about 6% of your income, and you're trying to tap into that and trying to scale. And then you still got a social life, you still got kid, you may have kids. So a lot of the times it's very hard to scale your business with your money. So your paycheck is your most expensive dollar to borrow. It's a lot easier for me to go to a Chase, Wells Fargo, and borrow and get a line of credit at 50,000 at 0% interest, because that's the cheapest money I can borrow. And once I've calculated what my debt servicing is, I just have to figure out, okay, how many clients do I have to get in order to cover this dollar amount? And so I've made it a mathematical equation as opposed to an emotional decision, because I think that's what a lot of people do. They make it
yeah.
an emotional decision. They're like, oh my gosh, it's credit, the interest rate is this and that. But I've never seen anybody calculate the interest cost when they are swiping for concert tickets, or when they're at the
Mhm.
casino, or when we're at the mall. It's like we only make emotional decisions with credit when it
Mhm.
comes to investing. They never I've never even seen nobody complain about the interest rate on their car more than they do when it comes to leveraging
Yeah,
credit to grow their
that's
business.
right. You're right.
So I try to help the clients remove the emotion out of it, because at the end of the day, I always say it's just debt. I can't go to jail. I won't get beat up. I don't owe Pookie and Ray Ray money. I don't owe Big Paulie. Like, at the end of the day, it's debt. Usually, most people are already in that, whether it's from student loan debt, credit card debt from their 20s. Like, we have to get over this notion and stop being scared of something that we're already in. We just have to understand how to leverage it and how to use credit to make money. That's all.
You are right about that.
Most certainly. So, not going to disclose my age. I would just simply say I grew up in the mid 80s, and
We've
a
all
lot of
been there.
us grew up just having this, I guess, this conditioning that credit equals debt. So, how do you help people like reframe their relationship with credit so that they can use it to accelerate wealth instead of getting stuck in that conditioning that credit equals debt?
Well, I think a lot of it is because of the programming we've received. Growing up, I was always taught credit was bad.
Yeah.
Whether it's from my parents, relatives, but then I looked at how they abuse credit. So they're only talking from their level of experience. It's like when somebody has a bad relationship, now they say, "Oh, I hate all women," or "I hate all men." And so now we're taking the advice from somebody who's had a bad experience, and we haven't even had our own experience yet. And so I think that's what's happened, with a lot of people, is that they're taking they're taking the experience of someone who had a bad experience or who was misinformed and didn't have a financial savviness and understanding the power of credit. Because even when you look at, and I talked about this on a live the other day, everything that has been sold to us that's within the system does not work. It only benefits the people who run the system.
Mm.
And unless you know how to operate from what I call an intangible strategy, an abstract strategy, you will not win this game. And I've been willing to put up and do a debate with anybody for any dollar amount to say that first of all, saving money costs you money because you got to pay bank fees. Like, it's all of these things that's involved. And so when people are telling me they're scared of credit, it's usually for one or two reasons. One, somebody has given them some bad information on what credit is, or two, they've already ruined their credit. So it's like, how could you be scared of something that you've already have had bad experiences with? And so what it is that we haven't been educated on how to use it properly, especially, when you look at every single major corporation, from PayPal to Apple to Netflix to, I mean, I even read an article that Robert Townsend shot Hollywood Shuffle leverage
Yeah.
credit. Damon John, his mother leveraged her home and did a HELOC so he could start FUBU. If you look at every single major Fortune 500, Fortune 100, Fortune 10 company, they all leverage debt. JP Morgan Chase leverage debt. But the reason they say if you want to hide something from people, you put it in a book, because you only get those strategies in the books that we don't want to read. But yet they tell us, but they feed us all of these YOLO and self, like they feed us all of the crap for us to go out there and think that the goal is about making six figures or working really hard. No, they've really conditioned us to play within their system, while they can play the real game behind our back. And all people like myself and other people who are in this field who's done a good job at being able to articulate and translate this information to the masses, we've just learned how to play the game at the same level that they play at. Think about this. As long as you have access to credit, there is no investment you can't make. It's interesting. Like, I was watching this video recently on this podcast, and it was a guy, his family owned, and they were trying to start a franchise of restaurants, and they were trying to raise some money. They met a private money lender, and he was willing to put up $25 million with no revolving terms at a 7% interest, and he turned it down. And he said that was the biggest regret he made, and it was because he didn't understand how money works or how debt works. And as I was listening to it, I was like, he don't understand. 25 million with no term, meaning that he didn't have to pay it back at a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And at 7%, that's the cheapest that you will ever find what's called unsecured money. Well, he had his business was the collateral, because they did ask for 25%, but he turned it down. And he said another restaurant franchise took it, and they grew to $100 million in 6 years.
Wow.
And he said that was the biggest regret he made. And he said, this is why, unfortunately, a lot of Blacks can't grow in business, is because we're scared to leverage other people's money. And I often tell people, why would we go and borrow money from, government money to go to college, something that can never be discharged in bankruptcy, versus I would rather owe $25 million to the bank, because I could always discharge that. I could always bankrupt that. Hopefully, if you got the access to the 25 million, you've bought enough assets to where the debt can cover itself. And so, going back to me saying I made leveraging debt a mathematical equation, I know if I borrow $100,000 and it costs me $750 a month, I'm going to go buy an investment property where I'm making at least $1,500 a month. But what happens is that people will go and borrow that $25,000, $30,000 on a credit card, and they'll go use it to create lifestyle, go shopping, take trips. But now they have to try to service that debt out of that paycheck where 94% is already accounted for, versus, from their taxes and from their basic living expenses. Their income never grew. And so we have such a bad taste when it comes to credit because we don't understand economics. And so I'm willing to have a dialogue with anybody when it comes to credit. And every time they try to say, well, no, credit is bad and you're wrong, they always tell me based upon their experience. And usually I can look at their life setup and see why they feel that way, because I'm like, you're a consumer. You don't understand how even money works. You know what I'm saying? So it's just about having more education, and it's not about education on business as much as we think. We really need to be more educated on economics.
No, for sure. I'm so glad that you took the helm and, you're teaching this. You teach that business credit is supposed to protect the person, not drain them.
Right.
When did that truth first click for you personally? Like, when on your journey did you notice that was the real business win?
Yeah. So in 2013, I made one of my first investments. I invested in a tax franchise, and I liquidated my 401k. Took money out my savings account, the little I had at the time, and I invested in a business, and it went horribly wrong.
Mm.
And I actually lost everything. And so when you lose 30, 40, 50,000 of your own money, it's very hard to recoup that. Odds are you may not ever recoup that. But at least if I were to lose 30, 40, 50,000 on credit, I at least position myself to where I can attempt to make an effort to pay it back by going out there and trying to make some more money. Or if I have to do what is called restructure my debt, I have no shame in filing bankruptcy, because it at least protects me from keep losing all of my assets. But if you lose $50,000 cash and now you have no savings, you potentially could still lose your home, your car, like everything. Versus if I leverage debt, and I think especially in our community, we've been bamboozled to think that bankruptcy is bad. No, it's actually an economic strategy. Successful people have been doing it forever, but it's because a lot of people in our community will file bankruptcy for a $1,200 credit card.
Yeah,
We'll file bankruptcy because we done went into the stores too many times, or went shopping, took that trip to Miami, and now we don't want to pay the bank back, so we'll file bankruptcy for $3,000. And I tell people, look, if you ever see Will Roundtree file bankruptcy, it's because I have millions out there. You know what I'm saying? But filing a bankruptcy will ensure that my assets are still protected. So it's not that I'm poor. It's called restructuring debt. And it's because, again, we haven't been taught these economic strategies, and as opposed to just understanding that we don't really have a money problem. We have a strategy problem.
Yeah.
Because
knowledge problem. Yeah.
A knowledge problem. Yeah. Because even if I'm not making a ton of money, like I have a client, 24 years old, he owns 6 properties, and we helped him get all 6 properties at the time. He didn't even have a job. So there's really no excuse for people. It's just that we aren't willing to delay gratification long enough so we can get in position. And that's unfortunately some people's problems.
Yes, that part, delaying gratification, that is a fundamental mistake that a lot of us have, especially in our community. No, I love that you said that. Sorry, B, I cut you off.
No, you're good. So pretty much when we talk about restructuring, how can an entrepreneur balance, what is the word I was thinking? Oh my goodness. Reinvesting in the business with paying themselves and still being able to save at the same time? How does an entrepreneur reframe their mind into that?
You're going to have to be willing to not get paid. You have to. And this is what happens when you quit your job too soon.
Yeah.
I tell people, if you want to just get a real lesson on how real business works,
Mhm.
Watch Shark Tank, because they ask the questions to the business owner that if you know how to read between the line, you can see where a lot of the gaps that people make. Almost every business owner that goes on there, you, or not everyone, like you'll see a business owner that'll go on Shark Tank, and they'll the shark will ask them, how much have the business made? And they say, oh well, this year we did 2.3 million. They'd be like, oh, how much did you pay yourself? And they'll say nothing. It's
Right.
because they're reinvesting it back into the business so that the business continue to grow. And so when I so I used to talk to people, and I used to do this training where I say people don't even know their number. People don't understand. People, we don't even know the difference between gross and net. A
Yeah.
business can do 2 million and you still be poor. I know businesses that's done $6 million and they still have a job. It's because they're ramping it up to get into the position so they can pay and hire and delegate and all of these things. And so the balance between that is that you're going to have to be okay going back to that delayed gratification. You may not get paid right away. And I can remember my very first year when I really first started making some real revenue and income back in like 2015, beginning of 2016 was my best year, obviously, of revenue I ever made. I think my first year I did like 385. I didn't spend any money. Next year it doubled. The year after, next year after that, like it 4 times that. My first 3-4 years, I didn't spend any money on Will Roundtree. Every dollar went back into my business. I didn't upgrade my lifestyle. I didn't buy a new car. I didn't buy a new house, because that is what put so many business owners in a bad position. Why I see business entrepreneurs who are, I know entrepreneurs who did 2 million 3-4 years ago, and right now, I mean, they're texting me asking to borrow money because
Yeah.
they upgraded their lifestyle. And I tell people, like, I you cannot, you can't squander your profits trying to look successful. And that's what so many people do. And you have to be willing to put that money back into your systems, putting it into your delegation, putting it into, automation, putting it into investment so you don't have to keep working hard. And
Right.
so the balance really has to be like, what's more important? Are you looking to do really well really fast for a short period of time, or do you want stability over a long period of time? And I chose stability, and
Yeah.
so I could have easily went and got the 7-8 million dollar house and all of this stuff. And I remember even, in 2019, at one point I had 13 cars, and most of them I was renting out. But as soon as the market started flipping and I saw that the dealerships were offering 25% over MSRP, I went and sold all my vehicles and only kept like
Mhm.
2 or 3 of them, because I understand market trends. And so I never got in this to be famous. I don't care about the popularity. Look, I just want to be able to be in a position to where one day I'm on an island with no, mosquitoes and seeded fruit. Like
Right. Say
I
that.
just
Yes.
want to be able to live a very good life. Retired. My mom's been retired for the past several years. Like I've been able to do a lot of things for so many people, in my family, because I didn't mortgage my future trying to look
Mhm.
a certain way, but in the beginning of my journey. And so that balance has to be like, that money is not yours right now. You have to be able to delay that gratification.
Yes, do not mortgage your future. I love that. That's a bar. I know, well, you're a big believer in multiple streams of income. For someone who's like just getting started, what's the smartest way to build that without spreading themselves too thin? I know you spoke about, keeping the 9 to 5 to kind of fund what you're doing, not getting out of, what you're doing too quickly. But yeah, what other ways can we get that started?
Yeah, so I tell people, first of all, the multiple streams of income isn't applicable for somebody who's brand new. Focus on
Hmm.
one thing first.
Okay.
And as you're branching out, the multiple streams should be within your wheelhouse,
Yeah.
not going to start 7 different things, because something is going to suffer. And so so for someone who is like in the like, let's just say in my industry, like, I'm not gonna, like, when trucking was really big, I didn't go start a trucking company. If anything, I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, let me put out an ebook that teaches truckers about understanding the expenses of what they're going to get
Mm,
into. And so you have to understand like your wheelhouse. And I think that for so many people, they're not educating themselves on business. They're just, oh, I can do this, and then they just jump into it. And so I think another mistake is people quit their job too early. And I think they quit their job because they feel like their job is a distraction. No, I tell people, no, your job is one, that's your only asset you have. Two, that job also should be utilized so you see what not to do as a business owner. Everything I hated about the company I was at, I said, I'm not going to bring those bad habits
I love that.
to my business, you know? And then while I was there, I used their printers to make my flyers. I used their ink. I pimped
Okay.
my corporation out to do
Mm,
everything for my business. If I could stay late and run up their electricity and work on their computer, I would have done that. And
mm,
so I leveraged my job for as long as I could. And then when I invested in the tax business and went horribly wrong, I had to go back to work. I didn't have any shame in my game
yeah.
because at the end of the day, one of the things I had to learn, I'm on this journey by myself. I could care less about what somebody think about. Like I always tell people, for you to get embarrassed, you have to care what other people think. And I've never cared about what other people think as much because at the end of the day, like I already know that like nobody's going to vouch for me when when it's time for me to meet my maker. It's like
Mm,
they're not going to
mhm,
use their last words on judgment to vouch for Will Roundtree. So like I have to be able to go all out and just from the personal development I got early in my journey, like I'm always willing to bet on myself. And so, but
mhm.
going back to your original question, stick to one thing and master it.
Yeah.
The other income streams have to come within that wheelhouse. And once you've mastered that, and then you can step away. If you can't afford to put somebody in place to run that business or run that engine, you should not be creating a whole nother vehicle.
Mhm.
Period.
Yeah, I think the misconception a lot of times about multiple streams of income, like you said, is being without outside of your wheelhouse. So thank you for stating that because it's like if you master this, you know all of the gears that kind of put that into place. So why would you go jump into another industry? So
Yeah,
I see that all the time.
all the
So
time.
yeah, so thank you for saying that.
And it definitely brings back, like, we know a lot of people that are entrepreneurs within our circle, and a lot of times they do quit their jobs. And I always wonder, like, what are they teaching their kids? A lot of them are parents. We're parents. And I look at this generation, I'm just like, dang, like, they don't have a lot of financial literacy and things of the matter. So when we think about teaching the next generation, how early do you think we should start having those conversations about money, credit, and opportunity?
Man, I might get in trouble for this answer. I
So,
always tell people, how can you teach something you don't know?
Well,
You know what I'm saying? And so, because you wouldn't quit your job prematurely if you really knew.
hmm
You know, you would make sure that you have good credit. You would understand the value of mentorship. You would like I always tell people financial literacy is only financial literacy to people who understand the language of finance.
yeah,
So if you don't understand the language of finance, how can you spew financial literacy to your child? You know, why are you working hard and you're not acquiring any assets? You're putting your children at a disadvantage. You know, do you have anything to pass down to your heir? And for so many quote unquote entrepreneurs, they don't. And I remember one time, my son, he's 15 now, and I remember he was about 7. And I was in a mall. I took him to the Gucci store, and I was like, "Son, you want this hoodie?" He was like, "No, Dad." I was like, "You don't want this Gucci sweater?"
yeah,
Because I'm trying to put into him what I liked at the time. And he
right.
was like, "Dad, I don't even like that stuff." Even to this day, like he's not into designer. But if you look at a lot of these parents who are entrepreneurs, that's what they think their kids want. We're trying to push into them something that is of a liking to us that has little to no value. My son don't want my cars. My son don't want my outfits and so how can I really position my son so he sees a true example of quote unquote financial literacy. So in September, I closed on a 4-unit building. My son is part owner of that building.
Yeah.
He now owns a piece of real estate. And so I'm teaching him through execution, not just pumping words into his head. Because half the time when they're a teenager, they ain't paying attention to us anyway, but they pay attention to the actions.
Yeah.
And so now when my son gets 18, he's going to be able to understand a little bit better once he's able to actually take advantage of what I put him in position to do. And so I was having a talk with him about 2 weeks ago, and I said, son, do you know you're going to have a head start in life? I said, you're a Nepo baby. And he said, what is that? I said, I'm giving you an advantage based upon what I have, what I'm in position to do. And I said, okay, so I got out my whiteboard and I drew out, I said, okay, we bought the building at this price point. By the time you're 18, it should be valued at X. And so let's say you pulled $100,000 from this building. You're going to be able to use this 100,000 for 3 different things. One, if you decide to go to college, you can use this $100,000 to pay for your college tuition, and you're not going to have to pay it back. The property pays for it. And if something happened, he can at least discharge that debt in a bankruptcy versus getting money from Sally Mae or whoever it is. You can't discharge that. Or 2, let's say he wants to start a business. He now has $100,000 that he can borrow from his property and start a business. And he doesn't have to worry about trying to rob Peter to pay Paul to invest in Billy, so he can start a business that may not ever get off the ground because he doesn't have access to enough money. Or thirdly, if he decides to start a family, want to buy a house, he can use that money to buy that house, because from a mathematical standpoint, for every $100,000 that you borrow from a property on a 30-year fixed term at 7.2% interest, his payment is going to be like $600-700. But he'll never have to pay that back because the tenants will pay it. So I put him in. So that's how we preach financial literacy to our children, is by actually executing and putting them in position to participate in financial literacy. He's not going to read my book, Credit is King, right now. Right. He's not going to read my book, Full-Time CEO. When I take him to my events, he's there, but he's not there. Yeah. So the only way we can do that is by execution with our children, or as I say, our heirs, and really giving them an advantage to have a head start. I started building his credit at 13. And so now by the time he's 18, he won't need a cosigner. He already has an asset. Like if he doesn't want to go to college, he won't have to. Like, I'm putting him in position so he can actually have a head start to win. Yeah. Because so many of us have come into this adult life trying to learn the finance or the money game or how to get ahead game at such a disadvantage financially that, I mean, it's almost like a lose-lose situation for a lot of us in the Black and brown community.
Yeah. Now, you said you started your son's credit, at a very young age. So for the families watching, parents, aunties, uncles, whoever, what's something they can start teaching right now to shift their lineage forward? Like, how do we start their credit at that young age that you did?
Yeah. So what I did was I called the credit card company, and I added him on he's on several, my credit cards as an authorized user. And so he doesn't get access to the card. He just gets the rental history on that card. And so now the card has to be in good condition, good standards, no late payments. The balance is low. As a matter of fact, on all the cards that he's on, he has a 0% balance. Like, here's one of the cards. This is my son, Elijah. So I'm always making sure that he's going to be in position. And so at 13, you literally can call whatever credit card company, bank that you have, add your child on as an authorized user, and all of that history. So if you have a 10-year-old card, a 15-year-old card, a 5-year-old card, that history will be on their credit report, just banking every year. And by the time they're 18, they can do what's called a tri-merge report, where they can go and pull their credit score for just a frivolous pull. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to do what's called a tri-merge. Once that credit report tri-merges, he can now go to any of the credit monitoring sites, and now he will be able to see his actual credit score. So imagine if it was standard practice that all of our children have a 750.
Yeah.
Imagine if it was standard practice that they have that, and now when it comes time for them to buy a car, they don't need mom or dad to co-sign. If they go to college and they need an apartment, like I'm really focused on putting my son in position to not enable him. And even as we were talking the other day, I asked him like what was one of his goals and like what he wants to do. And he said, Dad, well, I want to live in San Diego. And I said, okay, let's go on. All right, me too. All right. And so we went online and I said, let's look up and see how much an apartment costs in San Diego. So we go on there, we look. So I'm having him to look and understand that it costs to live the way you want to live.
Yeah.
So I'm preparing him in that capacity, even so he understands that, look, if you want to live in San Diego and he wants a M3 series BMW, and my son likes the clothes and the shoes and the Balenciaga, like he likes all of it, like, bro, like you're gonna have to I'm like, look, these are dad's houses, these not yours.
Exactly.
You gotta work to get the rest of them. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So I'm really focused in pushing him to understand while he's learning along in actual game mode or game speed. You know what I'm saying? So it's not me just opening up my book, Credit is King, and saying, okay, this is what a FICO score is. No, I want him to understand because I'm also letting him see it happen in real time from getting the property. Like when we did the closing, he was at the closing with me. So he understand like how big of a moment this is. When he gets his first rent payment, which will be November 1st, I'm going to open up the bank because we have a shared bank account because for that building, I set up a brand new company. So the bank account has me and his name on it. So when we get the first rent payment, I want him to see it. I want him to see like, son, this is how much you're making from something that we invested in, and you don't have to actually do manual labor, and you're going to be able to see this money every month for the rest of your life, and you could borrow against it tax free. So like I'm teaching him in real game speed, and that's how we really educate our youth or our family members on financial literacy. But first we got to know how to speak the language of finance.
For sure. Just don't go out on your kids if you guys are at the max limit on your credit cards. What he said was, what he said was, have the knowledge yourself first, and then you can teach. So get that clear. 30% credit usage, but we'll get to the credit is king. Get the book. But before we wrap up, Will, we always ask this question. And I know you have several books, but if you could give a title to your memoir of your life or your journey thus far, what would it be and why?
I failed my way here. And I tell people that because I failed 80% of the time, but it only takes one thing to work. But at the same time, the failure was the data I needed. The reason I lost that first business investment was because I got into it for the wrong reason. I did it just for the money and I didn't learn about business. But let's say that business worked out. Sometimes we get in businesses that's open, but it's not making no money. So I'm actually glad that business failed, because if it didn't, I would be there every year just trying to keep the rent payments going. Because in the tax industry, it's only open 10 weeks. My annual rent payments was $60,000 because I went and got an office space that was I took on too much debt trying to look like a business, but I needed that to happen. So now I know what not to do. I don't need to go get an office building where I got a $5,000 a month rent payment. I didn't understand in the beginning that tax season is only 10 weeks. I didn't understand in the beginning that that there's a cap on what you can charge. And if you're not doing corporate taxes, you're not making money all year long. And I wasn't doing bookkeeping. And so everything that I failed in made me a better businessman today. And unless you're willing to fail very fast you'll always continuously make the same mistakes, especially if you involve your emotions. You're like, oh man, like I just know that everybody got to file taxes, but everybody don't know you because you won't even spend any money for marketing. Oh, you're thinking popularity means influence. Those are two different things. I know artists who got 5 million followers on Instagram and can't sell 10,000 albums. So there's so much that I've learned just being on this journey. And so, yeah, failure taught me everything. That would be probably the memoirs of my book. Matter of fact, let me write that down.
Yeah.
Let me call my publisher.
All
Tell them
right.
to get started on that. For
Ooh,
real.
that definitely has been a wealth masterclass within this
Yeah.
55 minutes. And Will, I just want to say we thank you so much for sharing your expertise, for sharing
Pleasure.
your as well
Thank
as sharing your heart with our Sister Soul Sessions family tonight.
you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime, ladies.
Yes, we definitely took notes. I know I've been inspired. We're walking away ready to build smarter, not harder, for sure. So, family, make sure you follow Will at Mr. Will Roundtree on Instagram. Also, in his bio, you will see his link tree to several of his books. Like we said, you definitely want to become financial literate. So, make sure you follow him. He is everywhere. He is teaching something that most of us did not learn in our childhood, our youth. And a lot of us are just now getting the knowledge now. So make sure you follow him. And then, Will, if you'd like to give an outro for us, we would be happy.
Man, I don't really have like some fancy last minute words like a preacher or anything. The only thing I would say is like I often ask people like what's stopping them from getting to that next level. And the first thing they always say, especially when I'm in a room with people, fear is always the number one thing that people say. I'm scared of this and that. And I'm like, why? They're like, because false evaluation appearing real. And I said, no, fear should mean face everything and rise. And at the end of the day, I tell people, how can you be scared to fail if you already failing? Like once I learned I was already failing, it's like, man, I can go out here and be fearless because hitting rock bottom and losing everything twice and being homeless and being sued civilly and like I've lost everything several times. It's like rock bottom taught me something that no coach can teach me, no workshop, no festival, no conference, no guru, no shrink, no. It's like if you're not willing to go through and get your own experience in life, you will never learn how to navigate for what works for you in your boat. So that I guess I could leave with that.
And that was a word. So thank you. You said you didn't have one, but let me tell you, because that does stop a lot of us from even beginning. So don't be afraid to fail. It's your biggest lesson. Again, we want to thank you, Will. It has been a true honor. I appreciate your time tonight. And everyone who watched, thank you again for joining us for another episode of Sister Soul Sessions. I hope you enjoy your evening. Bye.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.